38 years of standing in front of classrooms and sitting across from furious parents teaches you something no leadership seminar ever bothers to mention. The most dangerous person in any argument isn't the loudest one. It's the one who's already played out every ending in their head before you opened your mouth. Claire thought she knew how this would go. She'd rehearsed it, probably in the car, probably in the shower, definitely in those quiet moments when she thought no one was watching. She was wrong about almost everything that mattered. My name is Thomas Bennett. I'm 67 years old, a retired high school principal from the Asheville Valley School District in western North Carolina. 38 years in that building, starting as a history teacher, moving up to vice principal. Finally taking the corner office with the window that faced the mountains. I retired in 2022 at 64 with a state pension, a nice plaque from the school board, and the quiet belief that I'd earned whatever years I had left. What I didn't see coming was losing my wife 6 months later. Margaret, everyone called her. Maggie passed in March 2023 after a long illness she faced with the kind of stubborn grace you'd expect from a woman who spent 31 years as a children's librarian. She believed every crisis was manageable if you just made a list and didn't raise your voice. We'd been married since 1985, 38 years. She was 63. Have you ever watched someone you love disappear so slowly that you start grieving before they're even gone? The Buncombe County Public Library downtown flew their flag at half-staff the morning of her funeral. I didn't know they were going to do that. I still can't drive past that building without my chest tightening. After the service, our son Daniel came to find me. He's 39, a regional account manager for a commercial insurance firm on Merriman Avenue. He put his hand on my shoulder, that tentative way men touch each other when they're scared of their own emotions, and said, "Dad, don't stay in that house alone. Come live with us. We've got the room." And I believed him. I sold the house Maggie and I had shared for 29 years on Sunset Mountain Drive. I packed carefully her reading glasses from the nightstand. A photograph from 1988 where she's laughing at something just out of frame. And $162,000 in savings that two people had built over a lifetime of being careful. I moved into Daniel and Claire's guest room on Chestnut Ridge Road in June 2023. The first 9 months were fine. Not warm, not wonderful, fine. The particular fine of a household that absorbed a person they didn't really plan for. Dinner together most nights. Conversations that stayed in safe, shallow waters. A rhythm that worked without anyone actually committing to it. Claire is 36. She runs her home like a logistics operation, chore charts, meal plans, color-coded calendars. She's not cruel, she's just managed. Everything in her life is managed, including me. And I was willing to be managed within reason, because Daniel had asked me to come, and because I trusted him. I made myself useful. That's what I do. When something's broken, I fix it. The kitchen faucet that had been dripping for 8 months. The gutters I cleaned out one Saturday without being asked. The loose railing on the back staircase that Daniel had promised to get to for 3 years. I bought my own food, paid for my own gas, stayed out of rooms where I wasn't needed. Let me be clear about this, because it matters. I was not a burden. By any reasonable measure, I was an asset. A 67-year-old retired principal with a pension, separate savings, and 38 years of experience, not creating problems for other people. That's not a burden. That's a resource. Claire understood this. I just didn't know yet what she intended to do with that understanding. March 12, 2024. A Tuesday. I know the exact date because I wrote it down in a small notebook I keep on my nightstand. A habit Maggie started and I never broke. Writing down one thing worth remembering each day. That Tuesday's entry was 2 words. I'll tell you what they were at the end. I'd spent the afternoon rebuilding the loose section of the back fence. Daniel had gotten a quote for $600 from a handyman on Haywood Road. I did it in an afternoon with $28 worth of lumber from the Ace Hardware on Patton Avenue. I came inside, washed the sawdust off my hands, poured a glass of water, and sat down at the kitchen table. Claire walked in. She pulled out the chair directly across from me with the energy of someone who's been building toward this moment for longer than the moment itself deserves. She sat, folded her hands on the table, and looked at me with an expression I recognized from 38 years of parent-teacher conferences. The look of someone who has rehearsed their lines and is now delivering them on cue. Thomas, not Dad, not a greeting. Just my name, placed like a period. We need to discuss the financial arrangement here. I set my water glass down. What arrangement? You've been living here for 9 months. A pause, deliberate, prepared. No rent, no utilities, no financial contribution to the household. I fix everything that breaks, I said, keeping my voice pleasant, and I buy my own food. And I rebuilt your back fence this afternoon for $28. She didn't acknowledge the fence. Have you ever watched someone ignore reality because acknowledging it would ruin their argument? You're sitting on $162,000. She knew the number. She said it the way you say a figure you've been turning over in your mind for weeks, with the particular smoothness of familiarity. Daniel had told her. My son had told his wife exactly how much money his father had in savings. I sat with that for a moment. Filed it, kept my face neutral. That money is Maggie's and my retirement, I said. 30 years of being careful on a principal's salary and a librarian's salary. That's what that number represents. And this house, Claire said, spreading her hands across the table like someone presenting a proposal she considered unanswerable, is what Daniel and I pay for every month. So here's what we'd like to propose. A pause. Another one of those rehearsed pauses. A contribution of $100,000 toward the household. Think of it as investing in the family. I looked at her. Or, she added, and 38 years of watching people deliver ultimatums taught me that the or is always the part they practiced the most. You find somewhere else to live. Outside, a car moved slowly down Chestnut Ridge Road. Somewhere nearby, a basketball bounced on a driveway. Normal sounds, ordinary sounds. The kind of sounds that keep happening while your world quietly shifts beneath you. I've handled parents who screamed at me, parents who cried in my office, parents who threatened lawsuits over beaminess grades. I've managed school board members, union reps, building inspectors, and one unforgettable dispute about asbestos tile that involved a lawyer and a very firm handshake. I know what a power play looks like. I know what it sounds like. I know what the person running it expects you to do. They expect you to panic, or beg, or negotiate from fear. I did none of those things. I finished my water, rinsed the glass, placed it in the drying rack. Then I looked at Claire evenly and said, "Thank you for letting me know." Then I went to my room. I heard her call after me, "Thomas, we should finish this conversation." The conversation was finished. She just didn't know it yet. I sat on the edge of the bed with Maggie's photograph in my hands for a while. While I told her quietly, "Looks like I'm going house hunting." I could almost hear her asking about the square footage. Maggie always cared about square footage. I didn't make any decisions that night. I'm 67 years old, and I didn't spend 38 years running a school by making decisions at 9 o'clock at night with my blood still warm from an argument. I slept on it. The next morning, I called Frank Dillard. Frank is 69. He was my assistant principal for 19 years at West Asheville High before he retired and moved out to Fairview. He has a pickup truck, an endless supply of terrible puns I've been pretending to hate for decades, and the kind of loyalty that only comes from going through something hard with someone and deciding that makes you family. He picked up on the second ring. "Frank, I need Beverly Cross's number." A pause. "Bill's realtor, Beverly Nessia, unless you know another Beverly Cross who sells houses." "Frank, what happened?" I told him. "Concisely, because concisely is how I tell things." Another pause, longer this time. "She gave you an ultimatum with accountant's precision," he said. "Yes, and Daniel wasn't in the room. But he told her the number, which means he knew what she was going to do with it." Frank was quiet for a moment, the way old friends are quiet when they're deciding whether to say the thing they're actually thinking. "Then you doing okay?" "I'm looking for a house," I said. "Have you ever realized that the people who should protect you are the ones who handed you over?" So yes, Beverly Cross had 5 listings in my price range by Thursday morning. Cash purchase, no contingencies. That's the advantage of being a 67-year-old retired principal with $162,000 in an account that nobody else has any claim on. I walked through 4 of them that weekend. The first 3 were fine in the way things are fine when you're looking for something you haven't named yet. The 4th one stopped me. A 2-bedroom Craftsman on Liberty Street in the Montford neighborhood of Asheville, 9 minutes from Chestnut Ridge Road. The porch needed scraping and painting. The kitchen faucet was loose. Apparently, I'm a magnet for those. The backyard had an old red maple that was just starting to bud. But that's not why I stopped. Maggie and I used to walk Liberty Street on Sunday evenings, before she got sick, before the last hard years. We'd drive to Montford and walk the neighborhood in that particular way of 2 people who aren't walking anywhere specific, but are walking together with purpose. She'd pointed at houses on that street more than once, not wistfully, not with longing, just with the appreciation of a woman who loved a well-kept craftsman and wasn't shy about saying so. I stood on the porch of that house, looked at the red maple in the yard, and sat with it for a moment. Then I called Beverly. "Make the offer," I said. "Cash, whatever they're asking." Beverly called back in 2 hours. "Thomas, it's yours. Hold on to that word. Yours." At 67 years old, after 9 months of spare rooms and managed dinners and someone else's mortgage and a Tuesday afternoon ultimatum about money, I'd spent a lifetime earning, having something that was genuinely, legally, completely mine felt like the first full breath I'd taken in nearly a year. I told Daniel that evening. He was in the kitchen when I walked in. The look on his face when I said, "I found a place, I'll be out by April 1st. That was the look of a man who'd known this was coming and had talked himself into believing it wasn't. "Dad, you didn't. I found a good place," I said. 9 minutes from here. You can bring the kids on Saturdays." "It was just a proposal," he said, shifting his weight. Claire didn't mean it as an ultimatum. I looked at my son. This man I'd taught to ride a bike, helped through a broken collarbone from a skateboard accident in 1997 that he still claims I should have seen coming. Coached through his first heartbreak and his first job interview. "Daniel," I said quietly. She told me to hand over $100,000 or find somewhere else to live. We both know what that is. He looked at the kitchen counter. "I'm not angry," I said, and I meant it. "I'm just going home." Moving day was April 3rd, a Saturday. Frank came with his truck at 7:30 in the morning, a terrible joke about retirement communities, ready before he'd even put it in park. We loaded my boxes in an hour and 20 minutes. I didn't have much. That's one of the clarifying gifts of moving into a spare room. You bring only what matters. And after 9 months, you know exactly what that is. Maggie's photograph, her reading glasses, the small notebook from the nightstand, my books, my tools, my clothes, a coffee maker that's outlasted for kitchen renovations and shows no sign of quitting. Daniel carried 2 boxes to the truck. Then he stood in the driveway with his hands in his pockets while Frank and I did the rest. Claire didn't come out of the house. I noted that without judgment, some people can't face the consequences of their own decisions while they're still in motion. That's a human limitation, not a character verdict. Right before I climbed into Frank's truck, Daniel said, "You didn't have to do this, Dad." I buckled my seatbelt. Neither did she. Frank pulled out of the driveway. I didn't look back. Let me be precise about what I felt in that truck, because this isn't a story about triumph. I was 67 years old, leaving the house where my grandchildren had started calling me Grandpa Tom, where Leo had shown me his dinosaur collection every Saturday morning, where Maya had taken to leaving drawings outside my bedroom door. I was leaving that, and it cost me something real. Can winning feel like losing when the people you love are on the other side of the scoreboard? But a man who spent 38 years teaching young people that self-respect isn't negotiable cannot go home and negotiate away his own. The Liberty Street house was everything the listing had promised and a few things it hadn't, including a loose board on the back steps that I fixed by Sunday afternoon, because, apparently, this is simply who I am now. On the second morning, I found a note in my mailbox. Folded once, written in that deliberate cursive of someone who learned handwriting before keyboards made it optional. Welcome to Liberty Street. I have strong opinions about hydrangea placement, and I make an exceptional lemon cake. If either of those things interests you, I'm next door. Eleanor Whitfield. I stood at the mailbox and read it twice. Then I smiled. A real one. The kind that arrives before you plan it. Eleanor Whitfield turned out to be 70 years old, a retired Buncombe County librarian who'd worked at the main branch on Haywood Street for 26 years. She'd known Maggie not closely. They'd served on a collection development committee together sometime around 2015. But enough that, when I introduced myself 2 days later across the low fence between our front yards and mentioned Maggie's name, Eleanor looked at me with the particular recognition of someone placing a face they'd been told about. "Catherine Bennett's husband," she said. A pause. "She talked about you. Said you fixed everything in the house yourself and pretended it wasn't impressive." She was right. It was impressive. I liked Eleanor Whitfield immediately. Maggie had good judgment about people, and Maggie had apparently vouched for me, and that was enough. Eleanor's note went on my refrigerator that afternoon. It's still there. The first week on Liberty Street, I kept to myself, the way I do when I'm somewhere new, getting the rooms right, learning the sounds the house makes at night, identifying what needs attention and in what order. Frank came for dinner on Thursday and declared the house significantly better than my guest room, which I accepted as high praise. The second week, Eleanor brought lemon cake. She set it on the porch railing without knocking, a move of considerable social confidence that I recognized and respected, and left a second note underneath it. Oven temperature matters more than people admit. This one is correct. She was right. It was correct. I settled into Liberty Street with the particular ease of a man who has finally stopped holding his breath. And then, 3 weeks after moving day, on a Saturday morning in late April, my phone rang. Daniel's voice had none of the careful management of the Chestnut Ridge months. It was stripped down to something younger and less composed. "Dad, I need to talk to you." "Go ahead." "We lost the Henderson account." A pause. "It was our biggest commercial client. $310,000 in annual premium. The renewal meeting, I mishandled the renewal, and they moved their business. My regional director is involved now. My bonus is gone for the year, and the branch numbers are." He stopped. "Dad, we're in a difficult position." I sat in the kitchen chair on Liberty Street and looked at the morning light on the backyard red maple. I had known this was possible. Not this account, not this week, but the shape of it. The credit card statements I'd glimpsed moving off the counter during my months on Chestnut Ridge. The conversations that stopped when I walked in. Daniel had been managing something he didn't want me to see. This was what he'd been managing. "What do you need, Daniel?" "We need help." "Dad, I know what Claire said was wrong. I know that, and I know you didn't have to leave. And I know what I should have done when she had that conversation with you, and I didn't do it. And his voice caught. "I'm asking for help." "I hear you," I said. "When your child finally admits you were right, why does it feel so much like pain? We could really use Daniel." My voice was the voice I used for 38 years when something important needed to be said without confusion. "I'm going to say something, and I need you to hear it clearly. I love you, I love Leo and Maya. That has not changed and will not change. What has changed is that I live on Liberty Street now, in a house that is mine, and my savings are mine. That is the arrangement going forward." Silence. "What I will do," I said, "is come over on Sunday. Not to write a check. To sit at the table with you and Claire, and help you build a list of the right calls to make. The right sequence of steps for two people who are in a tight spot and need someone to help them think clearly. That I can do. That costs me nothing but time." Another silence, then, quietly, "Why would you do that?" After what she said. "Because you're my son," I said, "and because holding on to it doesn't help anyone. But Daniel, the help I'm giving you is my time and my experience, not my savings. Those are mine. Are we clear?" A long pause. "Yeah, Dad, we're clear. Sunday at noon. I'll bring lunch." Sunday was quiet. Daniel opened the door before I knocked. He'd been watching for me, which I noted without comment. Claire was in the kitchen. She turned when I walked in, and the expression on her face was that particular look of someone who's been practicing an apology, and is now deciding whether to give the rehearsed version or the real one. I waited. She chose the real one. "Thomas," her voice was careful and unguarded at the same time. "What I said to you in March was wrong. Not just strategically wrong, wrong. You had done nothing but help this family, and I talked to you like a line item on a spreadsheet. I'm sorry." I looked at her for a moment. "I appreciate that," I said. "I accept it. And I'm not here with resentment, Claire. I'm here because Daniel's my son, and because Leo left one of his drawings outside my door on the day I moved out. And I've had it on my refrigerator next to Eleanor's note ever since." Something in her shoulders released. We sat at the table. The same table where she'd delivered the ultimatum with her hands folded and her proposal prepared. And I spent 2 hours helping them see their situation clearly. Not rescuing, not writing checks. Helping two people in a difficult position identify the correct sequence of steps. The conversation Daniel needed to have with his regional director. The budget items worth cutting first. The timeline for stabilizing the branch numbers. The short-term options that didn't involve asking his father for money. I did not write a check. I did not offer to write a check. And nobody asked me to, because we'd been clear about that on Saturday morning. And Daniel had apparently relayed that clarity to Claire. At the end of the afternoon, Daniel walked me to my car. He put his hand out for a handshake, a Daniel thing. formal in that particular way, of men who feel things deeply and don't know what else to do with their hands. I shook it and held it a second longer than a handshake requires. "Thank you, Dad. Take care of your family," I said. "And call me when Leo's baseball season starts. I have opinions about his swing that he's been ignoring for 2 years." Daniel laughed. The real kind, a man who spent 38 years teaching young people that self-respect isn't negotiable, cannot go home and negotiate away his own. Now, I want to say something directly to everyone listening, because there are things in this story that matter beyond what happened to me. The first is something most people don't know. When an elderly parent moves into an adult child's home, even without a lease, even without any written agreement, they have legal residential rights. In North Carolina, a person living in a home by permission of the owner is considered a tenant. Removing them requires proper written notice to vacate, typically 30 days before any legal action can be taken. Claire's ultimatum, hand over the money or get out, was not only wrong, it was legally uninformed. I knew this. I'd spoken to my attorney on Charlotte Street within 48 hours of that Tuesday conversation. I chose not to weaponize that knowledge. I used the time it gave me to find a house instead. Retirement savings are not a household resource. They are a life's work. They belong to the person who built them. The second thing is this. A life care agreement is a legal document that specifies the financial and living arrangements between an elderly parent and an adult. Child, rent, utilities, household contributions, the parent's rights within the home, conditions for ending the arrangement. It protects both parties. Its absence, in my situation, meant that Claire's demand for $100,000 had no legal foundation whatsoever. My savings were mine, in my account, with no lien, no claim, no mechanism by which she could compel a contribution. She was asking, I was not obligated to answer. If you are an older parent considering moving in with an adult child, have the conversation about a life care agreement first. Not because you don't trust them, because clarity at the beginning prevents exactly this kind of Tuesday afternoon ultimatum at the kitchen table. The third thing is simpler. Keep your money in your own name, in your own account, with no joint access given to anyone who hasn't earned that level of trust over a very long period of time. Retirement savings are not a household resource. They are a life's work. They belong to the person who built them. It's been 7 weeks since moving day. Eleanor came over last Thursday with a second lemon cake. Different recipe, she specified, because she believes in iteration. And we sat on the porch and talked about the Buncombe County Library's renovation project on Haywood Street, and whether the new reading garden in the courtyard was going to be planted correctly. Eleanor had strong opinions about that. Maggie would have had the same opinions. I told Eleanor that. She received it with the particular quiet dignity of someone who's been told something true and knows it. Leo came over with Daniel last Saturday. He spent 45 minutes showing me the Lego set he'd brought in his backpack and explaining the structural logic of his design choices with the seriousness of a tiny engineer. I told him about the footings on the back fence repair I'd done that morning. He found this genuinely interesting, which confirmed my assessment of his character. The drawing he left outside my door is still on my refrigerator, next to Eleanor's note. The journal entry from March 12th, that Tuesday, has 2 words. I mentioned them at the beginning, and I owe you the answer. It says, bought house. I wrote it that night, before I called Frank, because I already knew what I was going to do. 38 years of running a school building means that when someone sits across from you and delivers a prepared speech and waits for your response, You already know in the first 30 seconds whether the speech worked. It hadn't worked, and I already knew what came next. On Sunday evenings, I walk Liberty Street the way Maggie and I used to, past the old houses with their deep porches, through the Montford neighborhood that she loved for reasons she always described as self-evident. The red maple in my backyard is in full leaf now, which it wasn't when I bought the house, and which feels, in that particular irrational way, that beautiful things feel sometimes, like something arranged. Eleanor waves from her porch when I pass. I wave back. The journal entry for this Sunday will say something like "Good evening," which, at 67 years old, on a street Maggie loved, in a house that is mine, it genuinely is. If you found value in this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to Karma Court Files. It really does help these stories keep coming.